Welcome to the Psychology World podcast. I'm Connor Whiteley, bringing you psychology news, articles, and other interesting psychology-related articles. Where I can find the podcast notes and more interesting psychology-related things, and you can get your free 8 psychology book box set at connorwhiteley.net. Now let's get on to the show. Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 90 of the Psychology World podcast with me, Connor Whiteley, and today's episode is on how do drugs affect behaviour, and it is Friday 30th of April 2021 as I record this. So this is a great episode that I think that I actually really enjoyed writing about, the new biological psychology book, and also I really like it because it really does bridge the gap between abnormal psychology and clinical psychology with biological psychology, and also because drugs are a massive problem in society and also in the US and in the UK, it's really good just so we can understand how these drugs affect us and affect human behaviour. So moving on to the psychology news section, moving from the British Psychological Society Research Digest, and there's some quite interesting articles. So for example, passion is linked to greater academic achievement, but in some coaches more than others. Passion is a word that often crops up on job descriptions and in interviews. Online articles explain how to academically express your passion to potential employers. On the whole, passionate people, those who have a strong interest in a particular topic, who are confident in themselves and who dedicate themselves to what they're doing, are thought of in a positive light and are considered likely to achieve other goals. But when it comes to predicting achievement, how important is passion really? According to a recent paper, passion may matter less in certain cultures, and the fact that passion is often seen as the key achievement may reflect a distinctly Western model of motivation. And this I completely agree with, though, because I absolutely love culture and how culture impacts our behaviour. And also, I think that this is really important that we actually consider that the things that we believe in the West do not necessarily matter in other cultures, and this just provides further support for it. And also, passionate, I think, is a very westernized idea, simply because you being passionate puts a lot of focus on you, which of course is a typical characteristic of individualistic cultures, whereas the East, that they tend to be collectivist cultures, which is where you focus more on the group. So I'm actually not surprised that collectivist cultures, passion is less important, because passion focuses on yourself and not the needs of the group. So I think is actually quite a good one. So another one is, how much do you want to exercise right now? Researchers are studying people's in-the-moment motivation to be active. Think back to the last time you did some exercise. What exactly prompted you to get up and do it? Was it because it was scheduled, or because you felt a strong urge to engage in some physical activity, or maybe a bit of both? And I'm just going to jump in here and say that I literally did some exercise about half an hour ago for about 45 minutes, and it was just scheduled, really. I do it every morning. Well, no, actually, every weekday morning. Okay, so we're jumping back into the article. Traditionally, researchers have explored a person's general disposition to exercise and look at strategies to increase the exercise levels over a week, month, or longer. However, the new study argues that it is also crucial to consider transient changes in the moment one's desires and urges for physical activity and also rest. The team believes that by influencing these feelings, people can be encouraged to exercise more often. And this I can definitely see the logic of, because if we think about it, when we want to do something, and when we want to do something at the moment, we tend just to do it. So I actually think it is quite reasonable that if we can make people just want to do exercise in that particular moment, then yes, that's actually quite reasonable idea about how to get people to exercise more. What do you think? Okay, so we will do one more. So students with ADHD aren't always given the support they need to thrive at university. Isn't? Yes, that is definitely true. Okay. So, doing well in educational settings can have huge advantages: better job prospects, higher wages, greater life satisfaction, and more. Achievements at university isn't always to do with how hard you work or how intelligent you are. However, first-generation university students are more at risk of imposter syndrome, for example, reducing their engagement in a class, their attendance, and overall performance. And those with special needs, university can offer all kinds of extra challenges. Yes, yes, it can. As a new study makes it clear, it finds that students with ADHD obtain significantly lower grades than those without the diagnosis, suggesting that academic and pastoral services are not going far enough to support neurodiverse students. And this I can really understand, because I really don't think that there is that much support for what I've heard from other students and everything. And I know at my university there's I forget what it's called. I know that it's the LPI, so Learning Plan Intervention. I think that's what it's called, and it's something. But I've looked at that tons of times from a psychology perspective, and I'm not sure that really goes like that far either. So I don't think this is a problem that we need to tackle, though, because just because you have a educational need or you have a mental condition, it does not mean that you should fail or you should find life any harder than other people. And in those situations, I think that scaffolding, which is where you provide people with as much help that they need to complete the tasks themselves, is so important. Okay, so that's it for the psychology news section. Let's move on to the personal update. So, but there isn't a lot to talk about this week in this personal update, simply because it's definitely been quite a weird week, because there's been lots of family stuff going on. For example, yesterday was the 1 year anniversary of my grandma's death, so it's definitely been a lot of family stuff, being there for the family and everything there. So there's nothing, there's nothing too dramatic to talk about though. But something I did want to talk about, or give you a slight TV recommendation, is on BBC 4. I think it's Friday, the 7th of May 2021. Is that there's a great TV programme on the violent brains, and it's all about the social psychology. Because it also goes into social, cognitive, and biological psychology on violence, and it is done by no other than Steven Pinker. Which, if you've read my forensic psychology book or my social psychology book, then you would know that I'm actually a massive fan of Daniel Pinker, because he does come up with some really interesting points though. So I'm really looking forward to that programme. And when I found it and when I actually read about it, I sort of just shouted out without even thinking, oh my god, the Steven Pinker. And it's very rare for me to get that excited about a particular psychologist. So I really, really do recommend checking out that programme. I know that I will. So that's The Violent Brain on BBC 4, Friday 7th of May, about 9 o'clock, I think. I know it's somewhere around that time, or on one of the other days. Probably should have checked before I started recording. And aside from that, there's actually not a lot of other things to really report though. So as always, I always love to know your thoughts and feelings on today's episode. So you can always email me, connorwhiteley@connorwhiteley.net. You can always leave a comment on the show notes at connorwhiteley.net/podcast. And you can always tweet me on Twitter at sci-fi whiteley. And this episode has been sponsored by my brand new biological psychology book that was released last Monday. And even if you don't like biological psychology, just buy the book for the cover. The cover is beautiful. I really, really love this cover. I think the cover is just so great. So really just buy the hardback version just for the cover. I know that's what I'm doing. But on a more serious note, though, it's a great book how that goes into such depth about biological psychology, always in my characteristic, easy to understand way, and it's filled with tons of great examples about how biological psychology can actually relate to our everyday life, and explores so many great topics. For example, the nervous system, how the brain affects us, very interesting stuff about the brain, and also genetics. But one of my favourite parts of the book, there has to be the last, I'm pretty sure it's the last 3 chapters on our primal drives, which is hunger, thirst, and sex. The sex chapter is actually quite amusing because it's still filled with tons of great information about the biological psychology of our urge to have sex. But I do sort of make a few critical points though about how we have sex, and that is sort of a bit ineffective. So it's actually quite a funny book. And males, because I know quite a few males listen to the podcast, you can actually find out about the male cycle, which I thought was actually quite funny and quite hilarious in like some bits. Some bits though, because I had no idea that males actually had a cycle. So I really, really do recommend this book though. So that's Biological Psychology, 3rd edition, available on all major ebook retailers, and you can get the paperback, hardback, and large print version from Amazon or your local bookstore. And you can order the ebook directly from me at payhip.com/Con Whiteley. So, let's move on to the content part of today's episode. So we're moving on to the content part of today's episode. So we're going to be looking at how do drugs affect our behaviour. So this is a biological psychology and a clinical psychology episode, which I think is like really good. And unlike the previous episodes where I've been doing it in the audiobook format, I'm actually not going to do it like that this week though, because this chapter is a extract from a much longer chapter. So there also looks like cocaine and like everything else. Anyway though, so hopefully you will really enjoy this. I know that I enjoyed writing this. And to some extent, I will be reading this, but then I will also jump in and also add my own thoughts though. Okay. This has to be one of my favourite biological psychology topics, because looking at the effects of drugs on behaviour means that we can apply all of this knowledge to our everyday life, since drugs are a massive problem in the world. Therefore, drugs can either facilitate agonist or inhibit antagonist synapse transmissions. The case of epilepsy. This condition is a great way to look at the effects of drugs, because epilepsy, which causes seizures, are caused by abnormal electrical signals in the brain. Thankfully, they can be treated with anti-epileptic drugs, AEDs. These have reduced the likelihood of a seizure by alternating or reducing the excessive electrical activity in neurons, as well as different AEDs work in different ways and have different effects on the brain. In more detail, these drugs work by attaching themselves to the surface of the neuron. Afterwards, they affect the neurotransmitters responsible for sending the abnormal messages to the brain. For example, some AEDs affect the sodium channels, where they bind themselves to sodium channels on neurons, like pheton and lamberine, whereas other AEDs block calcium channels. Dopamine and mental health. Another way how neurotransmitters can impact behaviour is by causing mental conditions, and I talk a lot more about this topic in Abnormal Psychology 3rd edition. But the levels of dopamine in the body can have a number of effects on behaviour. For example, too little dopamine can cause people to feel lethargic and miserable, as seen in depression, cravings and withdrawal, lack of attention and concentration, as seen in ADHD. This can be seen in Ritalin, as it blocks the reuptake of the dopamine, but in a more gradual and controlled way. This is often prescribed for people with ADHD, meaning this boosts the concentration of dopamine in the body, allowing the dopamine levels in the body to return to normal. Also, addictive substances increase dopamine activity in certain areas of the brain, as seen in the reward pathway, as mentioned in Aaron, Fisher and Brown 2005. And that's actually a great study that I actually go into quite a bit of depth in the book, because it is a very effective study, clever and effective, which is always good in psychology research. But too much dopamine in the body can cause hallucinations and paranoia, like in schizophrenia, uncontrolled speech and movement, like in Tourette's, agitation and repetitive actions, as seen in OCD, overexcitement and euphoria, like when people are experiencing mania. Additionally, almost all abused drugs stimulate dopamine release in the nucleus accumbens, as well as a sustained burst of dopamine inhibits cells that release the neurotransmitter GADA. This is thought to be one of the causes of schizophrenia. Please see Abnormal Psychology 3rd edition for more information. Although something I love about psychology is that sometimes pieces of facts contradict each other. Sometimes a lot, sometimes only slightly. For example, activity in the nucleus accumbens probably contributes more to the wanting of a drug than the liking of it, yet it does have a role in both. This is supported by the fact that addiction is heavily based on someone wanting a drug, as the amount of pleasure decreases during addiction. Alcohol and its effects are well known and people love it. Personally, I don't drink because of its taste, let alone its side effects. Personally, I just don't think the side effects are worth it. However, alcoholism is a problem that's going to be the focus of this section. Therefore, alcohol is a drug that has a long historical use and is used widely throughout the world, as well as alcoholism or alcohol dependency is the continued use of alcohol despite medical or social harm, even after a person has decided to stop or decrease drinking. For example, if a person has decided to give up alcohol, but they can't, then chances are they have an alcohol difficulty. And if you've read abnormal psychology or clinical psychology, then you would know that I prefer the term condition or difficulty over the term problem, since that word can be as harmful as the condition itself. Therefore, alcohol has a number of physiological effects. Inhibition of sodium moving across the membrane, expansion of the surface area of membranes, decreased serotonin activity. This is one of the reasons why alcohol is a depressant. And then some other ones are the enhanced response of GADA receptors, blockage of glutamate receptors, which is important for dopamine inhibition. Then the last one is like alcohol increases dopamine activity. And to treat addiction and abuse, this blocks the conversion of acetaldehyde to acetic acid, and methadone are used, but many people do not respond to other treatment. So medication has been used to reduce cravings instead. And surprisingly enough, alcoholism isn't just one type. In fact, there are two different types of alcoholism, and compared to type 1, type 2 alcoholism starts faster, sooner, usually more severe, and it affects more men than women. Causes of alcoholism. So there are several causes of alcoholism, including cognitive and social factors. But in terms of biological causes, there are genetic influences on alcoholism, because genes have an impact on impulsiveness, response to threats, and overall calmness. Yet some risk factors for alcoholism include family history, feeling low intoxication after moderate drinking, immense stress relief after drinking. So whilst there's nothing for me to say or add to that chapter, because everything's in there, including my own personal thoughts, I've also included in the book. I still think it's really important that we do understand this, just so we can help people and hopefully improve their lives. So hopefully you've really enjoyed today's episode. If you want to learn more, then please check out Biological Psychology 3rd edition, available on all major ebook retailers. And you can get the paperback, large print and hardback copies of the books from Amazon or your local bookstore. And you can buy the ebook directly from me at payhip.com/Conor Whiteley. If you know someone who would enjoy the podcast, then please tell them about it. I'm always really grateful when you spread the word about the podcast. So have a great day, everyone, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to see the show notes, then please go to conorwhiteley.net. And if you want a free 8-book psychology box set, then please go to conorwhiteley.net. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.